Day. All
Perfect.
right. So welcome everybody. I'm Julia Robbins, Senior Vice President with Camco. Thanks for joining us this evening. With us, we have Taylor Young and Steve Ross from RestoreCore. They are going to give us an important presentation about fire and life safety in our communities. I know that we have different board members from all different types and styles of communities. So I think this will be really valuable for all of us, and I will turn it over to Taylor. If anybody has questions throughout the presentation, you can throw them into the chat. We do have a smaller group this evening, so you can also unmute yourself, and we'll definitely have a lot of time at the end of the presentation for questions as well. So Taylor, I'll turn it to you.
Perfect. And as I said before, thank you so much for having us tonight. My name is Taylor Young. I'm a business developer with RestoreCore. I've been working with Camco for a few years now. I've met pretty much every single manager for all of the communities, and Steve and I have both collectively worked on a lot of projects with Camco. So we appreciate the partnership that we have. And just rest assured, if any of the things we're about to discuss today happens to you, we are there for you. And we work with the managers. You guys have a great management company. They stay on top of everything. So you guys are in great hands when it comes to if an emergency happens. I'm going to have Steve Ross introduce himself really quickly, just so you guys, he's going to be the one, if you have any technical questions throughout the presentation or at the end, he should be able to answer any of the technical questions you have. I'm not so much well-versed in the technical stuff, so Steve will kind of be your guy.
Hi, everyone. And just to kind of echo what Taylor's saying, thanks for jumping on. And you guys are truly in good hands with Camco. And I know I've been with RestoreCore for a little over 10 years, and I've gotten to know a lot of the property managers, and some of the unit owners on those properties. Basically, my position is project manager. So once the chaos of something terrible happening takes place, my team is the ones who help you put the pieces back together.
Thank you, Steve. Okay. So as we just did our introduction, and just so you all know, Julia, I'll send you a copy of this presentation afterwards if you want to be able to distribute it to the attendees today, so you guys will have everything.
Wonderful, thank you.
So this is kind of our agenda for this. I'm going to try to make it as quick as possible. I made quite a few slides, but just some interesting statistics about fire and life safety, the primary causes, why fire and life safety matters for residential communities. So that really, why does it matter to have those life safety protocols in place? The compliance aspects, preparedness tips, engaging and educating your communities, resources and roles, a fire loss kind of checklist that I made, as well as some takeaways, and then we can open it up for Q&A. But as Julia mentioned, if you guys have any questions throughout this, just interrupt me or put it into the chat. I'm more than happy to stop and we can kind of answer them as we go, or you can wait until the end. It's whatever you guys prefer. So a little bit about RestoreCore. We were established in Harrisburg in 1979. We have 8 locations throughout the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, and we're known as one of the leaders in condo and multifamily restoration. So today we're talking about fire and life safety, but we deal with everything from fire, mold, water damage, if there's hoarding situations, biohazard situations, we have done and seen it all. And we also have an entire reconstruction division. So we can put everything back together exactly how it was before any of these situations that you may call us for have happened. We're an active member of CAI Keystone, New Jersey, Chesapeake. And I know Camco is a big active member in CAI Keystone. So are we, and we also are on the apartment side. So with New Jersey Apartment Association, the Pennsylvania Apartment Association, IRM, BOMA. So we're part of many different chapters. We teach a lot of classes as well. So that's just a little bit about us. if you only remember one thing from this presentation, which I always tell people, and it doesn't need to be RestoreCore. I say this all the time. It could be any restoration company you want, but the faster that you involve a restoration company after a fire specifically, it's going to prevent more damage. The safer that your property will stay safer and your residents will get back to normal quicker. So if you take anything away from this, just make sure as board members that you have a restoration company that you partner with in your disaster plan or in your vendor contacts. Make sure that you have one. It's very important to getting everything back on track. So that's the one thing I really like people to take away from this. And it does not need to be RestoreCore by any means, but make sure you have one. So I kind of wrote down a little scenario. So imagine it's 2 a.m. and you or one of your residents wake up to the faint smell of smoke. So at first you think it's nothing. You're like, I smell a little bit of smoke. Then you start hearing a fire alarm. You don't know if a fire alarm's coming from your unit. It might be coming from a neighbor. If you have a mid-rise building or a high-rise building, or your townhouse is connected, or even an HOA, if the houses are next to each other, you can sometimes hear your neighbors. You open your door and you either see smoke or it's hazy. And again, it's dark out. It's 2 a.m. You might not have fire exit signs. You might not have a lit up pathway. You might not know where to go. So in that moment, everything depends on whether your community's safety systems are in place and working. And whether that's you or your neighbors, the management, and you're all board members. So the board, you're going to be the one that people go to besides management. So making sure that your community's safety systems are in place. Think if you're in a condominium complex and there's 6 or 7 units put together, townhouses. If there's a fire in that stack, where is everybody going? Are they going to the clubhouse? Are they just meeting out front? What are the safety procedures and systems for your association? So I want you kind of all to think about that in the back of your head and just think like, if this were to happen to us, do we have everything we need? Do we have those safety protocols, procedures? So just think about that, kind of keep that in the back of your head. These are some interesting statistics that I put together. So cooking is the #1 cause of fires in any residential community. It's responsible for almost half of structure fires in the United States. Then it's followed by heating equipment, electrical, smoking, and candles. So cooking is the #1, which I thought was very interesting. I never thought cooking was the #1 until I started doing this. Apartment buildings.
Taylor,
Yeah.
does that include grilling?
Yes, that does include grilling. We had a project that we did not too long ago that was a coal grill out by the pool, and someone decided to take the coals and put them into a trash can right next to the building, and the entire building went up. So it's, yes, anything cooking related is you got to make sure that you're safe when you're doing it. And then apartments are 64% of all high-rise structure fires. So high-rises can also be obviously commercial, office buildings, hospitals, but 64% of that are apartment buildings. And then every 24 seconds, a fire department in the United States responds to a fire. That's 3 a minute. That's an insane amount of fires that happen in our country. So kind of just to keep that in mind, I thought these statistics were very interesting. And then again, this kind of goes into a little bit more detail. So the unattended cooking and heating equipment, so that's stoves, ovens, some people use space heaters, portable cooktops. Maybe someone doesn't have a grill, but they have like a little portable cooktop. Anything like that are left on or misused are a huge, huge cause for fires. Electrical failures and overloaded circuits. So that's faulty wiring, an overloaded outlet. So if you have a fire strip that has, 15 different plugs in it, charging your cell phone, your laptop, your TV, those power strips and overboarded outlets can catch on fire. Damaged extension cords, those are another big one. And then lithium ion battery malfunction. So that would be power tools, laptops, phones. That's also e-bikes. I see a lot of people riding e-bikes everywhere nowadays. So e-bikes are a big one. It could also be smartphones, not just any phone, but smartphones in particular, power tools, hoverboards. If you see anybody on those like little skateboards that are motorized, those have them as well. Pretty much anything that they ask you if you have it on a plane and you have to take it out of your bag too. And then open flames and sparks. So that's candles, fireplaces, grills, as Julia was talking about, as well as any tools that would be able to like combust, any sparking tools. So if you think like any of those lighters that you can light a grill with, one of those as well. And then careless smoking. So cigarettes improperly disposed of on balconies or near flammable materials. A lot of people will just flick their cigarettes, and if they flick it onto mulch, mulch is highly flammable. People don't realize how flammable it is. So that can cause a fire. So there's all these little things. And then low temperature ignition. So that would be anything that's prolonged exposure, like a lamp. If you have a lamp plugged in and you leave it plugged in for 15 days in a row without turning it off or unplugging it, any type of chargers that you leave plugged in all the time, things like that. Fires can be started from a prolonged exposure to heat sources. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind. And then again, at the bottom, I put fire restoration can vary greatly depending on the extent and type of damage involved. So if you have a cooking fire is going to spread and happen quicker than something that's a low temperature that's kind of been cooking for a while there. So it's kind of important to keep that in mind. Does anybody have any questions so far? Am I talking too fast? Are we good? Good? Okay. So here are some best practices for communities to keep in mind during these situations. So compliance and preparedness. So regular inspections, we always say partner with certified professionals to make sure you check your alarm systems, sprinklers, if you have dryer vents, making sure they're cleaned, chimney inspections, fire extinguishers if you have those. Documentation, so keep maintenance logs. They're your legal protection and your audit trail. So if you have any type of maintenance in a bill, if you, again, if not so much with condo, with like townhouses, but if you were to have like a mid-rise building or something like that, making sure that you have maintenance logs. Or even if you have a community where you have a maintenance guy that kind of goes around and checks the landscaping, checks on the pool, make sure he's not finding any like cigarette butts by the mulch, make sure the grill is okay and up to standard. Checking all those little fire safety things is important, and documenting it. So if you see something, say something, especially to your management. And then resident drills, we always say it's good to have at least like one fire drill annually per building or per stack of buildings, just to make sure, like that scenario I mentioned before, if it's 2 a.m, the residents might not know where to go, especially if you have tenants, if you have a lot of places that are leased out and the owners are the ones not living there. It's important that the residents kind of know where to go and what to do in these situations. And then fire barriers. I was just telling Julia earlier, a lot of people might not even know what fire barriers are, but my dad lives in a condo or has a condo, and there's a couple townhouses next to each other, and they were just redone a few years ago, and the building next door had a fire, and one of the units did, and everybody thought it would be okay. It was going to be contained to that one unit because they have fire retardant wood in the ceilings and between the units. So, okay, it's not going to go over, it's not going to hop over. Turns out it didn't. So it spread, and all of the units and that whole stack of townhouses was ruined. It spread rapidly. So making sure that you have fire barriers, that would be something that you would find on your as-built drawings, or if you redid a roof or redid a unit, it should be in some type of architectural or engineering drawings. It could be in your bylaws, maybe, or your governing documents, or any type of like legal documents the association has, or on construction, it might be in there. And then you could also ask your manager to help you find out if you have those. But it's important for buildings that have multiple units, and even for townhouses that are connected, even if there's two connected, find out if you guys are separated by something that's a fire barrier. And then your vendor partnership. So building relationships with restoration and emergency response providers. So like us, but it could be anybody else, before you need them. So making sure everybody knows 911, right? But making sure you have 911 ready. You might have your fire department in your local town. You might want to have their number handy in case you have questions afterwards or beforehand about doing a fire drill. And then a restoration company. Effective communication. I put this together because sometimes we all kind of not forget how to communicate, but just making sure we get all of the communication channels that we possibly can with residents. So multi-channel messaging. So email, obviously, I know a lot of us send emails. If you have a lobby or a clubhouse, putting messaging up in there, bulletin boards, resident portals, text alerts, community newsletters, if any of you have one of those. It's always good to communicate with residents that way. Maybe even having like a little tips and tricks for fire safety, or hey, we have a new, we're going to do a fire safety day, or there was a fire in this building, this is what's going to be happening. However you communicate with your residents, it's really important to keep kind of everybody in the loop. Visual reminders, so infographics, if anybody has elevators or stairwells, making sure in the event of an emergency, whether it's a fire or not, how do they exit? That's very important if you have stairwells. And then welcome packet inserts. So if you have a new resident moving in, when they do all the closing documents and they become a member of the condominium or the HOA, maybe including a little safety info packet for that association when they move in. That might be something good. That could be a good strategy for communicating with the new residents. And then the National Fire Protection Association, the NFPA. So they named the month of October Fire Prevention Month. And then more specifically, the second week of October, I believe it's the 5th to the 11th, is Fire Week. And that's in commemoration of the Great Chicago Fire in 1871. A lot of our communities that we help and that are our clients, they do a safety day or like a fire drill during that week, because it's kind of like everybody's talking about fire in that time frame. So kind of showing your residents like, hey, we're going to have an annual safety day. This is how you exit your building. This is the meeting point in case of an emergency. This is how you use a fire extinguisher. Some might not know how. Anything like that. And you can contact your local fire department to get involved with that. A lot of the times they're going to jump at the opportunity because they don't want to be called at 2 a.m. So if they can help you reduce your risk of a fire, they're happier. They get to stay home with their family, their children. They don't have to come out. So they will pretty much always say yes to doing that. So I always suggest that. And then language accessibility. So making sure if there was an incident or is an incident at your community, making sure that when you send out communication to the residents, that anybody who's non-English speaking still gets that information, so that there's no language barrier there. And then some resources that's good for boards and communities to have put together is Firewatch. I'll go into a little bit about Firewatch. So it's a temporary safety protocol that's required when, say, you have fire alarms or sprinklers and they're out of service or they need to be serviced. A Firewatch company will come out and they'll monitor your site for the risk of fire. So they'll make sure nothing happens while the sprinklers are disabled. And it's typically mandated to have one after a fire, during system repairs, or anytime a fire protection system is impaired. I believe there is a company just called Firewatch in general. So they're always good to have the number for a restoration company, the Red Cross, in case you have a huge loss and multiple residents are misplaced. The Red Cross can help assist you on temporary housing. A fencing company, because you have to fence in the affected area. A security company, you want to make sure people don't break in during events like this. Unfortunately, when there is a big loss like a fire, people tend to break into places. I don't know why, but they do. So making sure you have a security company, garment restoration company, that's a good one to have on file. That's so in case a fire happens and a resident's clothes all need to be cleaned or restored and they don't want to get rid of their clothes that were, filled with smoke, that's what that company would do. And then a structural engineer, obviously, because most of the time, if it's big enough, I don't know, Steve, how many times would you say we've dealt with a fire where we've had to involve an engineer?
Almost 100% of the time. I mean, anytime it gets under the wall, it's in the insulation, it's in the drywall, and that automatically would call for an engineer to give the new code standards for, new insulation and make safe and drywall codes.
Yeah, thank you. So definitely having an engineer as a resource would be good. And then kind of like the manager's role in all of this, which you guys all work with your managers, I'm sure. So the responsibilities after a loss. So reporting the incident promptly. Generally, the board, you guys aren't going to get calls about the fire right when it happens. The management's generally going to get the call. So they will report the incident. They will prevent further damage by calling the right resources for the board. They will pretty much document everything. Most of the invoices are going to go to management. The communication is going to go to management in terms of getting, access to the unit from the fire department, the restoration company that's coming on, any contractors, if you need a plumber, if you need an electrician, all of that's going to kind of funnel through your manager. They will also help facilitate access and coordination into the units. That's one thing. It's always great to have access. A lot of the times we don't get access right away to the units because they're not cleared by the fire department yet. But once they are cleared, having that access is everything. And then obviously they'll help support resident communication. I don't know if Julia, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you covered it all. I just want to kind of segue in a little bit. It's going to depend on your community's insurance policy. I know we have different types and styles of communities here, but it's really going to depend on whether or not your association has the master property policy for insurance. Typically, most of you will have that, but some communities, even townhomes, don't have that. That kind of adds in a little separate layer where the unit owners are dealing with that on their own. But typically the master policy is going to trigger, and that's going to involve us. And then we will help to also facilitate that with the individual unit owners' HO6 policies too. So not to get too complicated, but there are other levels of communication throughout the process with the insurance claim.
Definitely. And the insurance claim is a big part of it. I know that Steve in particular, works with almost all of the residents directly. If there is an insurance claim, he'll work with the property management company, but then also the direct residents, because we could go on for hours about betterments and a bunch of different things that go into it. But yes, that's a very, very good point. And then a little checklist. So immediate checklist whenever this happens is, first things first is you want to ensure safety. So you want to confirm that all of the residents are evacuated, accounted for, and that they're not re-entering into any unit, townhome, anything until it's cleared by authorities. That's number one, because someone might say like, oh no, I need to get my clothes, or I need to get my laptop, or I need to get something. Do try to help facilitate that they do not re-enter. You want to put their safety first. Notifying emergency services. So that's obviously call 911 immediately. If that's not already done. So definitely do that. And then the fire department must clear the scene before any restoration or anything can begin. So before we start getting the smoke damage out, before we start clearing it out and sweeping everything up and cleaning everything out and getting reconstruction started, the fire department has to clear the scene because they need to investigate to find out what the cause of the fire was. And then securing the scene. So that's restricting access to damaged units or buildings to prevent any further injury, theft, or any further damage. So you want to make sure, like I talked about the fencing company, security company, you want to make sure you secure the scene and restrict access so that things just don't get further damaged and nobody gets hurt. And then contacting your restoration partner. So call a professional restoration company to assess the damage. That's going to be very important when it comes to what Julia mentioned in regards to the insurance claims. So call a professional restoration company. They'll assess the damage. They'll assist you with board up, tarping. They can prevent any secondary losses. So that's why I had said in the beginning, it's important to have a company on standby because it will prevent the damage from getting worse. And then discontinue utilities to damaged units. So that would be making sure the electric is shut off, the gas is shut off, the water is shut off, to any fire affected areas to prevent any additional hazards or damage. That's an important fact. And then notify leadership and insurance carrier begins the claim process. So share photos, any initial reports you may get, and restoration contact information. That'll go directly to the insurance company. Generally, when you have a restoration company come right away, they document, photograph, take everything for you that then Julia and managers can submit to the insurance company. And then communicate with affected residents. So that's provide updates on safety, the access to the units, relocation if it's needed. And we always suggest be clear and be calm because in these situations, it's the worst day of a lot of people's lives when their entire house burns down. It's not a fun thing to deal with. People are not happy in that situation. It's devastating. So we always try to tell everybody to try to be as clear and calm to the residents that are affected as possible. And then document everything. So take photos, videos of the scene, save all the fire reports that the fire department gives you, and make sure you maintain communication and logs of the communication with residents, vendors, everything. So it protects you as the board and the association, and it protects your residents. And then coordinate restoration access. So that's to grant access to any of your restoration teams for assessment, drying. A lot of people always think like fire, hot, you don't need it to be dried out, but with the sprinklers, it all gets wet. So when there's fire, probably 85-90% of the time, maybe even more, Steve, there's flood too. So you're dealing with fire and water. So making sure things are dried, the soot is removed, and someone like Steve would come in and look at everything, and he will put together kind of a plan and an estimate for how to demo everything and put everything back together for you. And then walking the site with key vendors. So I always say it's great to have a couple of the board members walk the site with the manager during one of these instances with the key vendors. So you conduct an on-site walkthrough. It'll be for restoration, remediation, possibly your insurance adjusters to align on the scope and the next steps. So that walkthrough is really imperative because if you have the restoration company with you, your manager with you, and the insurance adjuster, everybody can get on the same page of what's approved, what's the next steps, and where does everybody go from there. And really aligning on that scope and the next steps is important because these are not projects that happen overnight. These are projects that take quite a while. And then obtain the fire report and permit information. So you'll request the official fire report and you check with the local authorities about permits needed for repairs and inspections. So that fire report will be given to you by your local fire department and by whoever the fire official was that cleared the scene, that said, okay, we know the cause of the fire. We know it happened in here for this reason. The scene is clear. It's no longer under investigation and you guys can begin repairs. That's basically what they're going to tell you eventually. It might take 24 hours. It might take 2 weeks. We've seen it get extended when they can't really figure out the reason for the fire. So make sure you obtain that fire report and then also contact your local authorities about permits. Then there's the support inventory and documentation, assists residents and the restoration team in documenting salvageables versus non-salvageables. And that's in terms of content. So especially in common areas or furnished units, which every unit's going to hope a lot of the units are going to be furnished unless you have an empty vacant unit for sale. But that'll document anything that might be salvageable. A lot of the times when there's big fires like this, there's not a lot that is salvageable. I've seen some things salvageable and then I've seen everything ruined. So it kind of just depends, but making sure you have the documentation of that. And then the plan for structural repairs. So that's any reconstruction restoration vendor will help develop a repair timeline and estimate for rebuilding. Again, that's like what Steve does. That's where he gets in. He works with the managers, works with you as the board, works with the residents to develop the repair scope and the timeline for rebuilding and what that's going to look like and the estimate for everything. And then addressing odor and indoor air quality. So scheduling a deodorization and an air filtration will help, especially in adjacent units that weren't directly impacted but might have smoke. So if anybody has say a 2-story townhouse and there's 6 of them connected and the only thing you share is, one wall in between yourselves and then you have the attic. Well, maybe the one on the end burned, had a fire. The one all the way down at the other end, it might not have had any fire. There's no damage, but that smoke could have gone up through the attic and all the way over into their unit. So making sure when a situation like this happens, all the surrounding units, you want to make sure, does anybody have smoke in their unit? Do you smell anything? Maybe doing a walkthrough with the management, with Camco, having them come walk through it with you just to make sure there's no smoke damage. Because if there is, then that's something that insurance companies should be able to cover in terms of getting the odor out, or it would be the residents' insurance.
We did have a question from Len. I'm answering the Camco question in the chat, but Taylor, if you can just touch on mold, I guess. More so, we're focusing on fire loss, but I guess we could have some mold issues from maybe the water that I
Well, it's interesting because especially when there is a fire and you have, of course, there's going to be water. Like I said before, whenever there's fire, there becomes a water loss as well. Mold grows very, very, very fast. And whenever there's water, obviously the first thing is containment and keeping that water in one specific area, which it's very hard to do when there's a fire because if sprinklers go off, they're drenching everything to try to get it out. So mold grows very fast. So getting like dehumidifiers in there and fans and air scrubbers, those are the first things that we're going to do when we stabilize a unit. Steve, I don't know if you want to touch on that a little bit, but I know from what I've seen, that's what we do right away.
Yeah, and that's correct. We try to get air movers and dehumidifiers in there as soon as possible and to get any wet contents out. So, that may be personal belongings of the individual owners. But one thing about mold is so mold's a living, breathing organism, right? So it needs the right conditions to grow. So if you leave those conditions saturated, humid, it's going to grow. If you address it quickly, get things taken out, you cut the source off of, whether it's a leak or if it's from like a fire and water was standing there for a few days, the quicker you can address it, the better. And no one even likes the word mold, so we try not to say it very much. But you keep your areas dry, keep everything wet out of the unit. If there was a fire loss, that's how you're going to avoid any kind of mold damage or mold growth.
And like Steve said, we don't like to call it mold. We generally call it SMG, or suspect microbial growth, if anybody wanted to take that with them, because as soon as someone hears mold, it's over. Everybody's very nervous about it. I think I have one more bullet on here, and then we're pretty much done, and we can open it up to a discussion if everybody wants.
Yeah.
So the last thing is just keeping residents informed and maintaining communication. So that's give realistic timelines to your residents, explain safety measures, address concerns with them, and then review lease and legal requirements. So, confirm your responsibilities under any, like if you're a landlord, especially under the lease agreement. That's always important to do. And then just some takeaways. So it was just cooking's responsible for almost half of the structure fires in the US, followed by heating, electrical, smoking, candles. The faster you involve a professional restoration company after a fire, the more damage you prevent and the safer your property will stay, and the sooner your residents will get back to normal. Regular inspections, super important. So documentation, making sure chimneys are cleaned, making sure dryer vents are clean, making sure fire extinguishers work, making sure sprinklers work. All of those are super important, because if they fail, it can be catastrophic. So making sure all of that's done, doing some resident drills, maintenance, having your vendor partnerships put together, and then having those multiple channels of communication. That's always good to have. Again, your key vendors, and then always ensure safety first. So in the event of a fire, always call 911 first. And then document everything. I always say over document when there's a situation of a fire, because it's only going to help you. There's some instances where, if you have a fire start and you say, oh, I think it started from that, the insurance company might say, I don't believe you. How do I know it started from that? They'll try to fight you on stuff. Sometimes the insurance company isn't your best friend with these things. So document everything. And then that's it. So I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Yeah.
Oh,
Got a couple of follow-ups in the chat that I'll just ask you guys, and I like some of these. So Jonathan asked a question about responsibility to determine if the residents have fire extinguishers in their kitchens or other places in their units, and that the fire extinguishers are appropriate for the type of fire, that they are properly charged. And that's a good question. In my experience with most condo units, we don't do fire extinguisher inspections within the units themselves. It's typically in common area hallways where there might be fire extinguishers. A lot of our condo multifamily buildings have sprinklers in them, so they don't necessarily have as many fire extinguishers there. So typically we are not checking within the units for extinguishers, but that's the type of thing that we're including on. Tayler made a great point, and a lot of our communities do this. In October, we send out an annual reminder. We post it on the portal as well, just about these fire and life safety tips. One of that's going to include about ensuring that you have the proper fire extinguishers on site. I love the recommendation too about using it. I will admit that that's one of my fears, right? Is like, what if I have to use this thing? Am I going to do it correctly? And I think you had a great suggestion too. A lot of our local townships or boroughs, their fire departments are just like chomping at the bit to come in and talk to your community. So we've even had some come in for like your annual meetings or just your, a regular owner kind of get together and just give some of those tips. And they could even potentially do some of that training while they're there as well. So typically, fire extinguisher checks are more so for common areas in community associations. Anne had a great follow-up, which I think ties in one of your topics too, that I think is a hot topic for a lot of us about hoarding. Because hoarding, if there's no access in the unit, what if one of these situations happens there and how do you address that? So are you able to kind of touch on that and tie it in with hoarding a little bit too?
Yeah. And you know what? We actually don't call it hoarding. We call them avid collectors because we
Oh,
try to be a little bit more sensitive to the situation. So we call them avid collectors. But yeah, I mean that's definitely a great point. And a hoarding related fire is probably like the worst case scenario that you can have because there is so much stuff in there. And yes, the access can be extremely limited. Steve, have you seen a hoarding fire before?
Yes.
Yeah, we have. And it makes it tough. It makes it tough on multiple levels. It makes it tough for the fire department to put it out. And it makes it tough on the owner of that unit because there's a lot more contents, a lot more gets ruined. It takes a lot more water to put it, to put everything out if it's smoldering, and which can cause damage. The excessive water can cause damage to the surrounding units. So we have had a few instances where they were avid collectors, and I don't think there's anything you can do about someone in their personal condo, right? So it's unfortunate, but yeah, it does make it a little more complicated when you're trying to address the issues and trying to get everything dried out. And this particular unit I can think of had newspapers from the 80s, stacked up, throughout the house, and it was tough. It was really hard to deal, and it was hard to see the person in there too, just because I think they were alone, didn't have family, and so it kind of, you kind of empathize, like, why do they have all this stuff? But it does take an effect on everybody.
Yeah,
think
and
one
Anne,
thing to kind of address hoarding, and you would put how to address hoarding before there's a hoarding related fire, which can be, as Steve mentioned, kind of difficult, especially if it is condo. So there's no inspections. But I had situations in the past where I used to be a property manager, and I had a situation in the past where there was a hoarding situation, and it was condo, so it was attached. It was like a stacked townhouse type of construction, and the neighbor on the other side ended up calling for a wellness check on the resident. Now the association, the board didn't want to get involved, management didn't want to get involved, but and we had told them we can't really do anything because of it being a condo and what's inside is kind of their responsibility. But the neighbor there was a smell. They were worried about the person. So they called non-emergency line for the local police department to do a wellness check. And that situation, a lot of the time, can spark them because a lot of hoarding situations are not in code compliance because there's no safety, there's no exits. So sometimes that can help a hoarding situation to kind of clear it out before something gets that bad.
yeah,
I don't know if that would help at all, but that could be a resource that I've had people use that resource in the past.
yeah. Go ahead, Anne.
We had such a fire here. We know there are other instances of similar situations here because people have told us, oh, I know one of my neighbors near me, but nobody, we're a small community. Nobody wants that person's their friend. Nobody wants to get their friend in trouble, but everybody's nervous about the condition. And it seems like there's, we had the fire marshal here afterwards, talked about it. The very people who needed to hear the message the most weren't there. It's just, it's just hard to know how to proceed, and putting it in the rules and regulations and explaining it at annual meetings and that kind of thing just doesn't seem to register.
Yeah, I've
And
seen in I was just gonna say, I've seen in very dire situations like that. And again, it's hard because you can't just sometimes go by word of mouth. In the situations where I've had it confirmed that it's been more condo building style, where there's been a maintenance issue, and one of our vendors have gone in and, you know, have kind of alerted us to the situation, but we've had to get legal intervention in some cases as well. And like Taylor mentioned, you know, there are sometimes local resources that will get involved, but it really just depends on, you know, your county or your township or borough, and kind of how involved they want to get. So go ahead, Steve. Sorry to cut you off.
no, you're good. Actually, I was going to touch on what you just said, and Ann, I was going to tell you that if your individual property is sprinklered, there's supposed to be inspections on the sprinkler system. So if, you know, local code, you have to have so many, like an inspection a year, that may grant them access, and, you know, and a fire marshal come in and say, this is a hazard, you know, so but Julie kind of touched
Not
on
in
that.
the units, not in the units, so.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about the fire watch?
Go ahead, Ed.
If the sprinkler system is going to be disabled for an extended period of time, let's say days, does the fire watch have to be 24 hours a day for that whole period of time, or just at night, or
No, for that whole period of time.
the whole period?
The whole
Yep.
period. Yep.
Oh, wow. Okay.
They're
know,
just sitting, waiting.
I
But
know
yeah,
you
they're
didn't
there
want to
to
hear
protect.
that, Ed.
I know.
No.
It's especially if it's for a long time. But yeah, they have to be there the whole time.
Okay. Thank you.
Ed, you
Are you
probably
having
don't
that
have to sit
happen?
there. We can, someone can be hired to come do that. That's not like someone on the board or the property. There's like Taylor mentioned, you know, it could be outsourced.
Well, and that's the reason I asked. A couple of years ago, our compressor failed and we had no pressure in the system. And by the time they got a new compressor, it was about 10 days. And the expense was
Wow. Yeah.
big.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if it had to be 24 hours a day, or there was times when you didn't have to have it. So
Yeah.
sounds
No,
like all the time though.
good question, but yeah, it's something that we get a lot.
And then I see Jonathan, you had a question. Does the HOA have an obligation to check storage areas for potential fire risks? Are the storage areas in a shared space? Like, could the residents rent out a section of a storage area, or are these like private storage?
Well, in our building, residents have storage areas. They're not inside their individual units. So let's say on each floor you have one or two storage areas, and each storage area has things for, let's say, a dozen units. And you can see them. They're wire cages. So you could conduct a visual inspection. And frankly, I'm thinking that might be a good idea. I mean, we tell people don't store paint, don't do this, don't do that. You know, we do tell them, but you know, humans are humans. But my question is, do we have an obligation to kind of preemptively go inspect and then tell people, hey, I noticed this in your unit, I noticed that?
I would definitely do some sort of inspection, maybe like once a year. I would definitely check, or if you're passing by and you happen to again see something like paint, or you see someone has a like one of those scooters that everybody's riding around, those electric scooters. If you see something like that stored in there, especially if you have multiple floors and it's stacked on top of each other and it's a shared space, I would definitely think that it would be an obligation just to check it, just to be safe, because it's going to cover you as the board. If there is anything, you're reporting it, you're documenting it. And it's going to cover you and your liability, and it's going to help with your claim at the end of the day. If you knew about it and you reported it and you told them they couldn't have it, it's just going to help you in the end. So I would definitely say that you should check those.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? Steve, is there anything you want to add?
No, I think you're real thorough with fire awareness and things you guys can do. And I was happy to hear somebody mention in the comments about having the proper fire extinguisher for the proper situation. So that's definitely refreshing to hear, because you know, you don't throw water on a grease fire, which not everybody knows apparently.
I did want to just add, and just kind of tagging off of one of Len's earlier questions too, about protocols for communities. And again, there's going to be different style communities, and we can kind of tailor it based on that. But generally, if we're just talking about a standard townhome community, again, there's going to be some level of interaction with what your governing documents say, and also about the insurance policy. But if the association does hold the master insurance policy, a lot of times the insurance carriers will make what they call critical recommendations. You pretty much have to comply with them, or they would drop you as a carrier. But even if they don't make those recommendations, it is something that will ultimately help benefit your policy. You can put certain resolutions into place, such as dryer vent inspections. And I know it's hard. You know, people say, well, we don't know if people are actually getting them done or not. We do have the ability to ask unit owners to submit receipts for it. We can track if they submitted them and kind of escalate from there. So if you have the proper resolutions in place, especially if your governing documents allow for it, we can escalate and fine people if they don't submit those dryer vent or fireplace inspection receipts. We've had to do that at a multitude of different properties. Again, some are required by insurance carriers, some just implement that as a precautionary measure. Other things like smoke detectors or fire extinguishers, that is a little more challenging. We can't really can't force or require something with that, but with something where you're getting a professional vendor involved for dryer vent cleanings or fireplace inspections and cleanings, you can ask homeowners to submit a receipt for those. So we can help you further with that. We can also always tag in your insurance broker. They're always a great resource for us as well to help make some of those recommendations for your specific community. All right. Well, thank you, Tayler and Steve, for joining us this evening. If there are no further questions, we really appreciate everyone's time here this evening and joining us. And let's hope that none of us have to deal with with any of this. But I think the main point this evening is, let's be prepared. If it were going to happen, we want to make sure that we have as much information available in advance, and make sure that we are covered should one of these horrible events happen. So
hey Julie, and I'd be happy, like, if you know, quarterly, if you guys want to do another training session, I can kind of go through what it actually looks like. And you know, Taylor's got a lot of good thoughts on, you know, being prepared and what we can do. But I can take your group of HOA managers and property managers through what it looks like. Like, when you call us, what does that call look like? What questions are being asked? What's the downtime between mitigation and restoration? What permit times look like? I'd be willing to be available to you guys if you ever want to do another training session.
Yeah, no, that's great, Steve. I think we've done some stuff in the past with you guys, but I think it's always valuable to have that. And something I thought of too when both of you were sharing is you know, whenever there's I've had to go through I'd say 1.5 handfuls of fires, unfortunately, in my career with Camco. And instantly you're going to get homeowners who, there are companies out there that have the fire scanners. And
Yeah.
so your unit owners are going to get bombarded with these companies that come out, and I call them like fire chasers a little bit. And they come out. So there's some knowledge that we need to have on our end, and that's also good for the board too, so that we can help to mitigate some of that as well. And also just realistic expectations for the restoration time period. I know like when owners are displaced or residents, whoever are displaced, it's horrible. But sometimes the expectation of the rebuild, especially when there's structural damage and engineers are involved, you know, it takes time. I've not seen something, you know, where we've had a detrimental fire like that take less than a year typically. So I think it's good to have those realistic expectations when an event like this does happen. So, you know, we don't have people that are just angry with us and reaching out every day, every week about when
Yeah.
their units be ready.
Yeah, a
So,
common question I get is, well, I shouldn't say common, it's happened a few times, is someone's like, hey, you guys are rebuilding, you know, the condos down the road, but the apartments were built, you know, quicker than the condos are being rebuilt. I'm like, well, they're brand new, right? They've had 2-3 years of planning, permitting, like they're prepared.
right.
This is unaccounted, like that no one can prepare for a tragedy that, you know, that when we're involved is taking place. Yeah, so the timelines are very important to kind of echo what you're saying, Julie.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, and hopefully this was helpful to you all. We will have this recording available, and I hope you have a great evening.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you. See some of you. Thank you.
Bye.